Okay, we have a quorum. I'd like to call to order this meeting of the Coastal Resilience Advisory Committee on September 5, 2023. I will read the script for remotely conducting meetings. Good morning. This open meeting of the Coastal Resilience Advisory Committee is convening by video conference pursuant to Chapter 2 of the Acts of 2023. All supporting materials that have been provided members of this body are available on the town's website, unless otherwise noted. This meeting is being recorded. Please be aware that other people may be able to see you, and take care not to share your device's screen. Anything that you broadcast may be captured by the recording. Please silence all phones and devices. Ensuring public comment does not ensure public participation unless such participation is required by law. This meeting will feature public comment. For items with public comment, after members have spoken, the chair will afford public comment to those members of the public that have joined the meeting via Zoom. Members of the public who wish to speak must state their names and be acknowledged by and speak through the chair. Use the raise hand feature in the Zoom to indicate that you'd like to offer a comment. The chair will call on those who have raised their hands in the order they were raised. All questions should be directed through the chair. If you're not able to participate in the remote meeting, you may also submit comments to the Coastal Resilience Coordinator, Leah Hill, and request that they be read into the meeting record. Her email is lhill@nantucket-ma.gov. I'm Peter Brace, Chair of the Coastal Resilience Advisory Committee. Permit me to confirm that all members and persons anticipated on the agenda are present and can hear me. Members, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Doug Rose.
I'm here.
Gary Beller.
Here.
Tim Brain.
Here.
Rachel Freeman.
Here.
Jen Carberg.
Here.
Matt Fee.
Here.
Staff, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Leah Hill.
Here.
Vince Murphy.
Here.
Anticipated speakers on the agenda, please respond in the affirmative. Peter Morrison.
Here.
Finally, each vote taken in this meeting will be conducted by roll call vote. Okay. So I don't see a whole lot of other people, but Peter, do you expect people coming? Peter Morrison?
Not to my knowledge, but I'm here to speak on behalf of the Civic League.
Okay.
I haven't.
So since you're our only public member here, is there any public comment not related to what's on this agenda? Okay, seeing none. Continued discussion and final guidance on coastal resilience districts, CRDs, with Vincent Murphy, Town of Nantucket Sustainable Programs Coordinator. We will take public comment for the first part of this item, and then we will deliberate amongst ourselves and come up with more bullet items for which will be formulated to a recommendation for the select board. We will only want about 3 minutes from each person. And what was I going to say? Our staff will note your questions, and then when we're done taking public comment, we'll try and address those questions. So I guess, Peter, you have the floor.
Thank you, Peter. I'm Peter Morrison, co-president of the Nantucket Civic League. And as you all know, the Civic League is the umbrella organization for Nantucket's 25 established local neighborhood associations. First, I want to thank Leah Hill for keeping our 25 neighborhoods informed. She did a great job at our recent president's gathering. And co-presidents Charles Stott and I are looking forward to CRAC, and to you, Leah, in particular, to further what we think is a common aim, which is strengthening coastal resilience across our 25 established Civic League neighborhoods. Going forward, I just wanted to alert everyone to an obvious concern, how these coastal resilience districts are delineated with reference to the Civic League's 25 established neighborhood communities of interest. I'm speaking now based on my own experience drawing local election districts, which encompass potential voters. And I can assure you that stakeholders materialize whenever new geographic boundaries are overlaid onto established neighborhoods. And my point here is simply this: without careful consideration, overlaying the new coastal resilience district boundaries on established Civic League neighborhoods has the potential to disrupt what may be viewed internally within those neighborhoods as a stable local consensus, or it may arouse perceptions of apparent winners or losers. Our Civic League Neighborhood Association presidents expect to have a voice in aligning the future coastal resilience districts with each of their established neighborhood communities of interest. And we're doing so, they're doing so for the collective benefit of all Nantucket residents. So on behalf of the Civic League, Charlie Stott and I welcome Leah's invitation to coordinate with you all as thinking progresses on exactly how we want to align the geographic boundaries of prospective coastal resilience districts with those of our 25 established neighborhood communities of interest. And that's simply a matter of coordinating via the town's GIS system, where I believe they have the boundaries of our neighborhood associations, and assuring that the actions that are envisioned as necessary actions within coastal resilience districts are overlaid in a way that will be conducive to reaching a consensus on moving forward, rather than arousing, I would say, unwanted,
Peter? Sorry, I
unwanted
don't want
stakeholders.
to interrupt, but it has been 3 minutes. So Peter Brace, if you would like him to continue.
Yes, since we did so far, we only have 2 members of the public. We'll let him continue a bit.
No, I'm finished. I just, we want to work with you, and the easiest way to do that is to communicate closely as to what you're trying to do in a coastal resilience district and how we can align the boundaries of that coastal resilience district in a way that will be productive to groups that already view themselves as communities of interest. Don't mess with us, if you get my drift.
All right, thanks, Peter. I'm just curious, since there were about 30 of you guys at the last meeting, and obviously if we'd given them a chance, they would have spoken. And I'm just curious if you have at your fingertips some of the issues that they were looking to raise. Obviously, they don't want to pay too much money, but I'm, guess I was kind of hoping to be more public here, because we're looking to be informed by the public, so we can make our decisions to advise the select board.
I think we may have jumped the gun at the last meeting, because we got on short notice that things were being turned over to someone else, at which point we got the word out, you better attend the meeting and find out what's going on. And clearly this was clarified for me, subsequently by Leah, that, you're not about to draw boundaries on districts in the next 10 days.
Right.
I think the best approach, having dealt with this problem in the realm of redistricting, is to have open channels of communication. Obviously, you're going to be establishing districts that are centered on problems that call for particular types of solutions, and those solutions may cost money to local taxpayers. My simple-minded idea is, let's coordinate on making it clear why everybody within one of our neighborhood associations that's affected is a stakeholder and has a vested interest in having that solution enacted because it's the best solution to keep their properties intact. It's all a matter of avoiding misperceptions about things that are being done without consulting those who are being affected so that they see what's in their own interest. It's as simple as that.
Okay. Thanks, Peter. Is there any other public comment? Okay. Seeing none. I guess if others do show up and we do have the time, then maybe we'll take it, depending on how many people show up. But I guess we shall move to the committee discussion of the further bullet points. And Matt, did you put your hand up just briefly?
Yeah, I did a minute ago about something else, but I think Peter's has hit the nail on the head. It's partly why I've been sort of I don't think we can call the whole island a quote unquote district and then sub-district and everything else. I think we have to work within the betterments we have as much as we can now. I don't think we should be waiting years for something to come back from Boston. And I think we should be doing it on a project or neighborhood basis to build the consensus, just like Peter's talking about. You know, we have to be able to build consensus that, okay, here's what we're doing in Brant Point, to pick on one place, and here's why it's, you know, in everyone's interest within this boundary, and here's how it's going to work. You know, we have to understand that to be able to, you know, get people on board. And I think the problem is if we say the whole island is a district, and then we start talking about Brant Point, everyone's going to go, we don't want to pay for Brant Point. And what do you mean? We're not doing that. And we're not even talking about them. You know, we should be focusing our efforts and our attention on the areas that we're working on at any one time. So, you know, I think that's sort of why I've been kind of pushing the direction I've been pushing through this.
Okay. Before I lose that thought, I would think that thank you, Matt. I would think that the grants that we get for the various recommendations to pay for the projects, that is maybe de facto whole island district. That's for projects that's going to affect everybody. So that was a thought that I had. Does anyone else have a comment? Tim Brain.
Yeah, it's more of a question. There were some who were of the opinion that a island-wide CRD would somehow make the process of allocating funds, deciding which projects need to be done, prioritizing them, and then getting them going, that somehow that would be better with an island-wide CRD rather than just the existing processes in the town. And I don't know if there's anybody here today who felt that way. If I just would like an explanation. I'm not familiar enough with how the town funds things and makes priorities and so on. So it would just be helpful if someone has an explanation for that. Thank you.
Okay, Vince, go ahead.
Thank you, Peter. So I do have the packet item information that I want to put on screen, but there seems to be some general confusion, if I could put it that way, about how these kind of things would work. We've already received some advice on this. We had kind of two trains of thought, two tracks, and we've gotten some legal opinion on this too. So the initial idea was, would this be just for small area type things, or would this be whole island and then sub areas as needed, and then some whole island projects? It has become clear through the discussions, at least to me, that that's not how it should work. It should be towards the small areas, and then anything that affects whole island or large areas shouldn't go through coastal resilience districts and should be part of the regular process for capital projects. So leave that aside, and then look at putting together coastal resilience districts for the kind of smaller areas that are bettering individual communities that are of interest. Then The big difference between betterments and coastal resilience districts is they work on the same principles as betterments, but you can include a lot more that you can't do with that includes a lot more than just betterments. Coastal resilience districts, the principle is that you can have, just instead of doing a betterment construction, just like what they do for did in Monomoy area for the sewering of that area. We want to go beyond that and provide more through districting, coastal resilience districting, and that is betterments plus the ability to do operation and maintenance, which we know has been a significant issue on projects around the island. And second, we want to include more public benefits. That's one of the things that has become clear to me in the bullet points that have been developed, is that there seems to be a want to include more things like public access onto the improvement area, to ensure that it's not just closed off for the area, for the benefit of the area, for the people who receive the betterment plus the coastal resilience district. So this goes beyond betterments. I have to stress this. This is more than just betterments. We have existing frameworks, but this is more. This is additional. This is added onto betterments to have the ability to increase the public benefit of the area, have increased public access, include one big beach easements. They're already in place almost everywhere, but this would give more of those kinds of abilities. Operation and maintenance, I cannot stress this enough. The way that betterments work is that you can collect up all the money, collect up the funds, undertake the project, but then that's it. Betterments only cover construction. Have to be super clear on this point. They do not cover operation and maintenance. This is where things for, say, the the sewering of the Monomoy area, they were able to undertake the construction, but then the operation and maintenance of that falls to the sewer department. We don't have the equivalent type of department to take this up. So if we can have a way for town administration, natural resource department, whatever the other departments are involved, to be able to fund the continued work, such as adding sand, adding any other improvements, if you have to extend a structure or move a structure or retreat a structure or take it away, have the adequate planning in place. That also includes, and I have to get real technical on this, if we're going to have coastal resilience districts, what I'd like to see is an initial plan and a secondary plan, so that it's properly resilient infrastructure, so that we're not just going to rely on the first one forevermore, which we've also seen as a problem in areas around the island, so that we can actually have retreat scenario planning, so that the initial improvement might work for a certain time or until a certain trigger is met, and then you go with your backup plan. And it takes away the controversy from things and provides people in the district with the knowledge that this has, say, some limited life to it. It's the education aspect built in, so that people won't want to rely on this one improvement forevermore. So there are significant differences with what coastal resilience districts are. It should also be said that there is nothing like this in Massachusetts. This would be a first for the state. There are other similar things in other states. We have tried to see how they might be lifted and put in place here, but they just can't. They don't work that way. They work with wetland protections and other state level protections within those states that do not transpose easily to Massachusetts. So putting everyone out there, again, I've said this a couple of meetings in a row now, that this will be new for the state. What we are looking for and what we're trying to collect up for the select board is bullet point advice, bullet point information that can be used as the guiding principles when it comes to writing how this will be, whether as a bylaw or as a home rule petition. By the way, there was a third scenario to zoning. There doesn't seem to have been much interest in that. But this is how we want it. We just want the bullet point advice for how it should work without being overly prescriptive. If things get overly prescriptive, then it becomes hard for whoever gets to write this to put it together. It'll probably be put together by a group like Arcadis or some other consulting firm, probably Arcadis though, and legal counsel. That's the best way to approach this. So just so that everything is clear on the table, coastal resilience districts are way better and then betterments. I shouldn't have said it in that terms, but they are betterment. They are much improved version of betterments. That's the way that I would like to see this working. Now, it's up to the community if they want to see it working in a different way, but we have to just put it out there. I see two hands up, Peter? It's up to you. Do you want me to put stuff on screen, or would you like to go to the comments?
Let's get the comments and then we'll put the bullets up. Doug?
Oh, I'm unmuted already. Thank you. Just to answer Tim's question, I think I was one of the voices in earlier meetings arguing that, to me, the only reason to have a CRD, to go through the process of establishing something like that, is if it's island-wide. And the argument for that wasn't because all the costs would be shared island-wide, or it's that there's only one bucket that we'd be feeding from. It's feeding from, I believe, what Vicky Marsh's advice was, which is you don't want to go back to Boston to get special powers more than once. So the way I understood it or interpreted her comments was it would be wise for us to spend the time, go through the process of filing a home rule petition, admittedly a 3 to 5 year process. Doesn't mean we're not going to continue to do all the other things that I think Matt is advocating for. Let's use all the tools we have today to continue to make progress and show how the island can come together to improve resilience. Check. But this home rule petition, as Vicky was advising, would be wise because it would be in one fell swoop a way for Nantucket to establish some new powers, some new authorities that allow us to expedite the execution of the CRP long term. And I look at the CRP as a 50-year assignment. So for us to say, well, we don't have time to wait for a home rule petition because we've got to hurry up. I agree, we have to hurry up and we have to make progress. But I don't think it would be a bad idea to put the wheels in motion to try to get a more sort of formalized understanding with the state that allows Nantucket to do all the things that Vince just described. This is way more than just a betterment program, right? I have to say, now park that, Tim, sorry. That was my initial thinking. I have to say, I have been doing some further thinking and trying to break it down and understand truly what are the limits of our current authorities. And having done that homework, I'm now convinced that there's probably only one power that we do not currently have definitively, which is the one Vince was just describing, the ability to umbrella operating, maintenance, repair, removal costs in the future for a project under the umbrella of betterments. That it is a bit of a stretch. Now, when Matt asked Vicky directly that question, could we not figure out a way to stretch the terms of betterments, she said it's conceivable. So I'm not suggesting that home rule petition is a mandate. We have to do it, but I'm thinking it's probably worthwhile to explore as we see what we can do to stretch the current terms of betterments. Now, I'm saying all this as if I'm, an expert and have lots of years of experience in all this stuff, and I clearly don't. I will defer to Vince and Matt and others on that. But I guess that was the original argument for why it might make sense to pursue a home rule petition in a parallel path to doing what we're talking about today, which is where are the critical initiatives that need attention now? How do we get the wheels in motion using the powers that exist today? Check, check, check. So I hope that helps explain kind of where my head was. Thanks.
Thanks, Doug.
Thanks, Doug.
And Vince.
Matt?
Yeah, no, and I think what I'm seeing it as a short term, I agree, long term, it would be great. I think short term, we need to be focusing on like Doug just said, using the powers that we have and maybe stretching the powers we have, maybe tiering the betterments over, in voting different things every year, every few years as necessary. My concern, if we put all our eggs in the betterment in the Coastal Resiliency District basket, it'll give people a reason to say, hey, we don't have to do this yet. We're waiting for the state. We're waiting for this stuff to happen. Once the state give us this, then we can do it. We need to be getting on some of this stuff now. And a lot of what we have learned through SBPF, through other areas that we've had to deal with individuals and deal with homeowners. And, so I think if we actually tried to do some other projects, other, areas, we would learn some more things. So that by the, if we were on this within a year or two or three, I bet we'd have 4 or 5 other things that we'd want on our Coastal Resiliency District, wish list too. I think not sure we can expect to know everything we don't know right now, but once we delve into it, I think that will, some of those things will become clearer. So I'm trying to say, let's not like put this on a 5-year hold, inadvertently, and let's not think that we need to only do it one way. Let's do it the way we can and work on the other way. And this should be almost second. What are the things we have to do now within what we can do? That's what I think we should be focusing on. Thanks.
Thanks, Matt. Vince, before you put that up, do you mind if I let Rachel go?
Go for it, please.
Okay, Rachel, go ahead.
Thank you, Peter. I have to say, I really appreciate everyone's discussion about this at the last meeting and at this meeting. It's so fascinating to me. I see pros and cons on both sides, and it's interesting because I may have just come full circle from the whole island coastal resiliency district back around to the idea of starting small. And I guess what I wanted to, I guess I wanted to touch on what Matt was just saying, which I think is that I recently come to a conclusion about, working within the system, right? Working within, and I'm just loosely affiliated with the town, but working within, governmental entities, right? And I recently started to subscribe to the 1,000 little band-aids approach of getting things done versus like trying to go wholesale and do the giant project, which is going to fix everything. And it's interesting because it's like I don't know that there's a right and wrong, right? And I guess what I'd be asking is there a way to do both? Is there a way to have sort of the short-sighted, like these are our goals now, and then but we're working towards this bigger picture plan. So that's what I want to say. Thank you.
Okay, Vince, go ahead.
Thank you, Peter. Rachel kind of took half of what I was going to say. So I like this idea of let's have our cake and eat it too. Let's call it the dual approach. So how about, and I put this up on screen in a minute, we walk through what the scenarios, the bullet points received from committee members since the last meeting are. But how about I suggest a new bullet point just from the conversation that's just happened here. And I don't want to put too tight a noose on this, but how about this for suggestion? How about the committee suggests with a bullet point that existing powers should be exploited. No one's questioning that, they already are there. To try and progress projects, and that the town should try and pursue coastal resilience districts in 2 different ways. First, as a town bylaw to see if that can help it move along, and second, as a home rule petition to try and get the overarching powers that are needed. And I'm saying this for a specific reason. Nobody's questioning the powers that are already there to undertake betterments alone, without any additions that I outlined already. But if we go down the dual track route of having town bylaw and home rule petition, that means that there's some hope to progress things in the shorter and longer term. So if there was a bullet point covering that, why wouldn't that be the first thing at the top of the list that the committee seems to be looking at? Would that make sense? We can try and craft something really simple, and I don't want to put timeframes on it if we can avoid it, because that hems us in just a little bit. And what I'm hearing is that seems to be a sense of urgency to get on with projects, and by putting timeframes on things, we might only hamstring ourselves.
Vince, I think I agree with Rachel, and I think I'm putting words in Matt's mouth, maybe, or in the select board's mouth, but they're so busy running the town. They're going to look to us to make it efficient, and this is, to me, an efficient way to do it, because it addresses two different tracks: the bigger, longer picture and the picture that's in front of us right now. And so, whatever we can do within the bounds of the code of Nantucket, without having to go to the state, that's great. But at the same time, go to the state and get that all overreaching power so that we can operate looking forward. That makes sense to me.
All right, shall I put this on screen and start running through it, Peter?
Go ahead.
Okay. That's the wrong thing. It's the right one. You guys nearly got a good view of my email. Okay, I'm just gonna make this a bit bigger so that people can see it a bit better. Is that nice? People can see this okay?
Yes.
All right, so I'm just gonna put in a new first bullet point. Anyone want to have a packet saying something, or should I just type up that everybody understands that there's existing?
Why don't you type what you were thinking, and then we'll edit it.
Okay, sounds good. I'm going to have 3 parts to this, hopefully. Sorry for bad typing, guys.
All right, you're from Ireland.
Yeah, where the keyboards are sideways, yeah. Sorry for the dreadful spellings, everybody. And how do I have to solidify what? To solidify, open to suggestions, people. To solidify legal standing. No, that doesn't make any sense.
To solidify our coastal resilience district powers,
Thank you, Peter.
or creation powers, or something like that. Something that contains everything we want to do.
We're spelling the word for years. I still get it wrong occasionally.
ED.
Pursued with a U, P-U-R. There you go.
Okay. Bad grammar aside, does this catch what the committee is aiming at? So everyone acknowledges that there's a current system that can be used. That's first and foremost. That's part 1, or the existing powers. Then coastal resilience districts can be followed in a 2-tier fashion. First with the town bylaw, areas with current or imminent need. Second, coastal resilience districts can be pursued at the state level through a home rule petition to solidify coastal resilience district powers. Make sense? Does that hit what people want? Happy to edit.
Vince, I would just offer that second path is admittedly a long-term path. And the intent of bothering with a home rule petition isn't to solve a problem in the next 3 to 5 years. It's to solve a problem 10 years from now. So it's a short-term and a long-term in the way I look at it.
And
That's
so
why I broke them up.
after the word second, second, the ability to create the ability to create coastal resilience districts, or gaining the ability to create coastal resilience districts.
So let me, So are we saying that are we saying with this that we're going to do whatever we can now with betterments and other rules and regulations, that we're gonna vote a bylaw next, and then we're going to put a home rule forward later? Is that what we're saying here, or are we thinking the bylaw and the home rule are one and the same?
The
I'm
way,
looking at this as 3-2. Sorry, Peter.
the way I'm hearing everybody is that we're gonna focus on what we're gonna, I guess, do both at the same time. We're gonna do what we can within the town bylaws, but at the same time, hope maybe for the next annual town meeting, do the home rule petition, recognizing that that takes time, and since that's to handle longer term situations. I don't see why we would wait to see what would happen. We'd want to have that process started as soon as we could. Am I wrong? You guys tell me.
It's Matt again. I'm saying maybe. It depends what it is we're asking for. It depends whether whether we're gonna have a Concom vote at that town meeting about zoning changes or other things. Because I think this is going to be, when we start talking about what is a coastal resiliency district gonna be, or what about just a town bylaw changing some rules, though, that it's gonna be detailed and people are gonna have tons of questions. And we have to be really prepared and ready. And if it ends up going down the wrong track, we'll have trouble with it. So I just think we have to think through the timing of how to put that forward, when we'll be ready as a town and as a coastal resiliency group. But I think with, existing betterments and or, existing rules and regulations, we're ready to use those now where we need to. And I think we have to identify those, direct staff to use those, find a way to get going. And I don't think, so that is how I think we should be using, we have to use our time wisely there. And then as we learn, we do number 2 and number 3, or number 2, if you're combining home rule and bylaw, then that's number 2. Does that make sense?
So I was trying to phrase this with 3 parts to it. Maybe this just needs a bit of tweaking, so that to say there are 3 paths open, and these are the tiers in which they should be pursued by the town. First, the existing betterment system can be used immediately. Then second, sorry, Peter?
No, I'm sorry to interrupt. I just had a question. If we're doing a home rule petition and going to the state to create that, isn't that creating the ability, isn't that giving us then, we're creating a coastal resilience district law that allows us to create those. So we're not deciding at the home rule petition level which districts are going to be what. We're just trying to get that law in place so then we can do that ourselves. Is that correct?
Pretty much. But look, I'm going to go back to stressing this again. This is only the guiding points for how it should work. And we've only been asked by the select board to talk about coastal resilience districts. And we're acknowledging here with this first sentence that there's already something we can use. And then with these next 2 parts in here, we're saying the other paths that are open, and we're putting them in a tier. We're saying what we should do first, and then what we should do second. So it's covering all of the bases. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay.
From me.
So Doug's had his hand up for a bit. Doug, what do you got to say?
I'm sorry. I agree with the first line, check. We need to do what we need to do with what the tools we have today, check. I heard from Vicky, and I keep going back to her comments as my only sort of guidepost in this issue. Vicky pretty definitively said that a general bylaw is not going to get you where you want to be. It's not going to solve the bigger, broader question of authorizing the town to be able to house operating and management and repair costs under the guise of betterments. It's the only way really to solve it long term. So I guess I would question the need for a town bylaw. That's not going to get us anywhere. To me, it's either use the existing powers, see how far you can stretch them, and then long term work on a HR home rule petition that solves all those problems and puts a bow on it. And you're right, Peter, I'm looking at the same way you are. It would grant town of Nantucket, the authority to then go about establishing projects as it sees need, as opposed to having to go back to Boston or any other authority to get those powers. Sorry.
And so Doug, that's why I was saying that the home rule petition process should be started when we can start it, instead of waiting to decide if we need to do it at all. It already seems like we need to do it, so we should do that so that we have that ability. Then when we have the ability, we can go to it when we need it, but at least we'll have it.
That's how I'm looking at it. Yes.
Okay, Rachel.
Thank you, Vince. I understand that the town bylaw is limited, but I think the benefit is inherent in the getting buy-in, getting public buy-in. And you're basically, my understanding of it, if I have it correctly, is that by starting to do this in small areas and, you know, small projects and things like that, you're setting the stage in a way where people can actually see that, you know, if it's done right, that it's working, and therefore would actually provide people an opportunity to not completely, like Matt was saying, you know, not get as concerned when it comes to actually doing the home rule petition. I think it's a nice segue where you introduce people to the concept. And I do see what you're saying, and that there's limitations in its capacity, but I think it's really sort of a way to get people engaged more than anything else, frankly. That's at least how I see it.
Peter?
Yeah, Vince, go ahead.
So I have to just make one thing that I think is obvious, clear, because it might not be obvious to everyone. So what we're looking for here, what the select board is looking for, as far as I can gain, is that they want bullet points that will be used in the guiding of the writing of this, of the whatever bylaw or home rule petition. So we seem to be quite hung up on what powers that are existing. Great, they're there. We've covered it as the first sentence. Once we go through the bullet points, that's what we're looking for now, is guiding bullet points on coastal resilience districts, whatever form they take. We might go through a whole legal review and find out, oh, well, something that the committee wants is actually not permissible in Massachusetts, or it's contravening some existing state law or some existing town law. Once we put it through that legal review, we might find out that there's a problem. So I don't know that we can take everything that the committee is looking for as 100% certain. This is the guiding bullet points, something of a foundation document, so that when we go to write it, this is just the base. I don't know that everything that the committee is looking for will be able to be included in the bylaw or the home rule petition, whatever form it takes. But just bear that in mind, that we're just looking to provide essentially the constitutional base, if that's not too great a term to use, of how other law, or how it would become to be written later. So this is only the guiding principles. So just have to be super careful, yes, but we can also be quite general. People seem to be wanting to get extremely specific, as though they're writing parts of the bylaw now. We're nowhere near that stage. And this is what I think Peter Morrison was initially worried about, that we're not. We're just doing guiding principles. Does that make sense?
It makes sense, Vince, but I would encourage the committee members to be as specific as they can be, because it may be something that select board members don't think of, or town council doesn't think of. And we'll be glad that we all used our brains at this level, and that we took public comment from members of the public who may be thinking things that we haven't even thought of, and they can be cast off as the select board needs to cast them off, but at least we put them on paper and said, this is what we recommend. And this is how we thought it through. And if we're too general, the selectmen may give it back to us and say, do some more work. So we're better off, I think. Gary Beller.
Thanks, Peter. I have a couple of comments. I agree that we should use the existing betterment system now to move forward on our 40 named projects that we've already identified and are in our coastal resiliency plan. I think the other point is that based on the advice we have been given, there are probable substantial benefits from being able to have a coastal resilience district. And if we are really thinking about that, and certainly that's a long-term need, going to the state of Massachusetts will be much more important that it's a total island request versus any particular small coastal resilient district. And one thing we should make clear is that to the extent that we pursue this and we recommend to the select board that we should use these bullet points, there is no need now, and it certainly would be premature to start figuring out which should be sub-districts. What we say here is we create them as needed and eventually approved by the select board. So we shouldn't get the public concerned that, oh my God, they're about to decide which group is a district and which is not. That is something to be done in the future. What we need to do now is to start the long-term process of a home rule petition, which I think is best done by making the whole island a CRD with the ability to create these sub-districts. That's my thoughts.
Thanks, Gary. Matt, go ahead.
Rachel's comment got me thinking about the bylaw part. She's almost saying we go to the town for a sense of the meeting. And in a way that makes a lot of sense if you're building the consensus for the home rule at another time. Then there is some sense to that, saying, here's what we'd like to do, here's how we envision it, here's the thought process, here's a few examples of how it might work. That is going to be more that's going to be more understandable for, I think, for the voters and for the island than trying to figure the whole thing out. And so I think that could be a good step in our thinking of our strategy of how to do this.
Peter, can I make a suggestion?
Okay, Vince.
How about we just run down through the list and start whittling things out? If there's people who don't like parts, we can just skip it and keep moving. But see if we can develop something for feedback to the select board.
Well, I wanted to know if between the last meeting and now, and today's meeting, did committee members have bullet items that they'd come up with that they wanted to share, or are we good with what we have here?
We received feedback from 3 committee members. I can run through that if you wish.
Sure. Before we decide whether we want to add them, and then you go through it all.
All right, so okay. Right, so this one here, this bullet point at the start is new. We have to circle back to that one. The 3 bottom bullet points are what are new. So I'm just going to read them out so people can hear them. This one came from Jen Carberg. Have legal understanding and agreement in place on the ownership of the interventions put in place. If on private property, have a legal agreement between the town and private property owners, such as an MOU. Seek to include maintenance access, public access to intervention. Understand the legal ramifications of the town ownership of the intervention versus maintenance and an MOU. Maintaining MOU. So that one was from Rachel. This one now is from Gary Beller. I think Gary was one of the first to reply. Thank you for this, by the way, Rachel and Gary. Sorry, Jen and Gary, my apologies. Gary writes, consider whether CRD sub-districts should require majority approval of betterment initiatives by property owners before taking remediating actions and accompanying assessments. Then, if you don't mind, I'm just going to go to the third one. Doug put in 8 bullet points. It was more like a set of feedback, so I put it in the committee response section down page 13. I hope people got to read it. There's a lot in this. This covered a lot of ground, I have to say. some of it is very similar to what had already been discussed and what was on screen. Other parts are relatively new. So he went through it in various ways to try and define the purpose of it, looking at the funding, looking at the monitoring, and then limits in particular. I know Doug has mentioned limits in several different ways to try and not have other groups go first when they not necessarily need. He wants to, is it fair to say, Doug, on a needs basis, as per the CRP, rather than a needs basis as defined by the community?
That's right. Yes.
Yeah. And then this is new. I don't think I've come across anything about unintended consequences before. Do you want me to read out all of this? I'm happy to. Or does Doug want to give a highlight?
I'd be happy to jump in, Peter.
Okay, Doug.
I did this, I don't know, it was about a week ago, and it was only because I was still struggling with the basic question of what is the purpose of a CRD? Why are we even talking about it? If what sounds like we have all the necessary authorities, save one, within our toolbox, what is the purpose? Why do we even need this new term CRD, particularly when it could potentially raise unintended negative perception? Big government's coming in and messing with my local assessments and what have you. So I just wrote this purpose statement so that at least I could understand for my own self, why are we even talking about this? And as I understood it, it was basically a means by which the town of Nantucket could have the established authority to more fairly and efficiently fund the planning, construction, monitoring, maintenance, and removal of any long-term resilience projects that disproportionately benefit localized areas within the municipality. There's
Gary,
no need
can I just interrupt you for a minute?
Yeah.
So we're just recommending to the select board. We're talking about this because they asked us to recommend to them what we should do. So it'll be up to them to decide whether we should do these or at all.
No doubt.
Okay.
No doubt.
Want to make
I guess
sure
I'm putting it out there because I think if we're not clear on why we're even talking about it, then how can we advise them? So I tried to establish in my own mind, here's how I understand the purpose. I hope this is more or less accurate. And if this is more or less accurate, then I think it allays any fears about one single island-wide CRD that then impacts everybody's taxes equally. That's not the purpose of a CRD. The purpose of a CRD, as I understood it, was to give the town of Nantucket the authority to identify districts or benefit areas, if you will, that are project specific without having to ask Mother May I, going back to Boston or anybody else. So if that's correct, then I just laid out what to me felt like the most obvious attributes or guiding principles of funding. I added one thing in there, which was monitoring, which is I do think it's important that the town have the ability to be the client for any impact monitoring that's ongoing without them going through an intermediary like a homeowner group who understandably is going to want to argue that their resilience project is working brilliantly and there's no downside. So that was the purpose behind that. So sorry, Vince, I know I went a little long there, but I just wanted you to understand what I was thinking through here. I don't know if it's relevant for CRAC to include all of this in their recommendations, but I just felt like it was healthy because meanwhile, if we're providing advice on how to use CRDs, we haven't even defined what a CRD is and why we're doing it. So I'll pause there. Sorry.
So Matt, if you don't mind, could you maybe say how the select board might receive all of this? And what do you think about, I know Vince wants to go down through and have us say yay or nay, but what do you think about what Doug just said? And should we include this as our recommendations to you guys?
Yes, I think we should include this. I think we need, and this is what's really difficult to do, especially on Zoom, is to wordsmith 2 or 3 documents within an hour or two on a Zoom meeting. This is very difficult, and we have the same problem at the select board when we've got something complicated and it's, so I think, we should be able to say the purpose is X and here's the reasoning, here's the thought process, and here's how we think we should roll it out. but it should be as simplified as possible and then have backup to it. You know, I think what Doug is proposing here makes a lot of sense. You know, but it might be a little bit too much detail for the select board. And if you give a lot of detail, then you're asking the select board to understand it as well as all of us who have spent a ton of time on it, and they aren't going to. So you want to give it almost as well as, you know, as complete as possible in some way, as succinct and complete as possible it will work. Can I comment on Gary Beller talked about, you know, asked, are the neighborhoods going to get to vote, whether this happens to them or not? And I think that's an interesting comment. It's kind of happened now with MOUs, you know, privately it's happened now with a, you know, we'll talk to the neighborhood, or SBPF, we've had to get all the neighbors to sign off, and all the neighbors had to do something, you know, and so we have to think, is there going to be that level? If someone comes with something, do we then, you know, how do we decide whether we're going to do it or not? And then how do we decide there's enough support in that neighborhood to do it? You know, that should be part of the process, you know, and the idea of jumping the line, you know, things can change. Like, we've got a coastal resiliency plan, but we might find there's more things in a certain area. So there's got to be a little bit of flexibility. And then there were certain things that weren't written into coastal resiliency, like SBPF wasn't written in, or Sconset wasn't, Baxter Road, because it was already underway. And so you have to look at it and say, okay, how are we going to deal with these, you know, going, you know, how do we do it fairly? And I think that's a bullet point. I don't know how that is that the administrator of whoever's going to be in charge of this plus crack, or is that, how is that done? That should be in there.
Can I make a point on this, Peter?
Okay, Vince.
So there's an interesting couple of things in this, and as much as I like it, I just have to make a couple of simple points first. Through the existing betterment law, I'm just going to move you guys from one screen to another, bear with me. Through the existing betterment law, you don't need to ask for a vote. That's not part of how current betterment procedures work in Massachusetts. So there's a couple of things that I see as a little bit risky in what Gary's proposing. I see the benefits in it too, there's no question about that. So say, who even gets to vote until you have a district set up, then you have to know who's voting in and what might be something for them or not. So you have to understand who's in and who's out, who gets primary benefits, who gets secondary benefits. That will already have to be mapped. If a homeowner association, I'm not trying to pick on Peter Morrison, I'm just using it as an example. If a homeowner association decide of their own volition to go ahead and have a vote and say that they want something or don't want it, does that mean that the town then has to go ahead and do it? Don't know. Should it be that the town, or probably Coastal Resilience Advisory Committee, defines the area to some rough extent and then calls a vote amongst that homeowner area or that betterment area or that coastal resilience district area? And then what about the outside entities? I hate to bring up the stunningly obvious, but there's large landowner neighbors that might not want to see something that a homeowner group wants to bring up for an area that's not on their property. They might want to do it on a neighbor's property that's, you know, conservation land. That will obviously cause more tension. So there's obviously the huge benefit that everyone might get their say, but who is the person having to get their say? Who's saying that what they want? Then there's another potential thing to bear in mind. I don't know if this is good or bad. Say the people in whatever area voted down, and then we just say, all right, you were given the option to take something for your area. You don't want it anymore. The town's going to walk away. This is all in your responsibility now. Where's the benefit in that? You know, fine, this whole area goes away, or all the people are left to deal with things by themselves. What if they have a revote and then suddenly they realize, oh, we made a mistake. Now we do want the town's help. I'm not sure that we need to have a very defined bullet point on this. Maybe something that instead of saying vote, have area input. A vote is a bit too large and final. Comes with some risks, I don't know, but I can obviously see the benefits of it too. Thank you, Peter.
So Vince, the first word in that bullet item is consider. So that's saying consider it. It's not saying do it. And we're trying to put ideas into the select board's heads. And I say we leave it.
You say which, Peter?
I say that we leave that bullet item that you have highlighted.
Sure.
Gary Beller, go ahead. And
Yes.
before you go ahead, I just want to remind everybody we're at the 1 hour mark, so we need to make decisions about these bullet items before we end the meeting. Go ahead, Gary.
The reason that I put that bullet in there is because it strikes me when I read of the materials that Leah sent around to us, and looking at these communities off the coast of Long Island, that's exactly how they did it. They had the local communities took a vote because they were the ones that were going to pay for whether, I don't know if they called it betterments then, but they were the ones that decided to do it. They took a vote, and those districts voted to assess themselves in order to pay for these substantial improvements to protect themselves. And the other thought that I had, which is different from something that Doug Rose recommends, which I disagree with, in the case of Long Island, in a couple of the instances that we read about, the people who voted in favor of it and who are paying for it were also the ones monitoring it, because it's their money. They're monitoring it to make sure it's being well spent. And for me to put all of that burden of monitoring on the town of Nantucket would be just another burden on a stressed group of town employees that they have enough to do otherwise. So I would make sure that the local people getting the benefit of this are the ones that approve it, and I will also have them actually do the monitoring because it's their money that is being spent.
Can I respond, Peter?
Yes, Vince.
So we don't know that they're going to be the one, they're going to have put some money towards it. That's the whole purpose of Coastal Resilience District, so that there's buy-in. But we don't know how the funding model is going to work yet. Would the local contribution from the people in the benefits district be 30%, 60%, 100%, and it'll probably vary widely by each district that might get created. So yes, they will have some money towards whatever monitoring. We don't know whether it will be a percentage or 100%. So just bear that in mind. Second, if there's division in a community and you vote for something, that's great. You're happy to take on that expense. And if you vote against it, you automatically have an opposition group amongst you and your neighbors. It's automatic division of a community. Whereas if the town comes in and is the baddie and is the one just imposing it, then everyone just has to pay by whatever percentage. Just one idea. I'm not set on any of that, by the way.
All right, Doug, go ahead.
Peter, I'll be quick. I think I take the first word, as you were saying, the most critical word in that sense, consider. And I think if we want to make progress on this long list, maybe we should be looking to add words like that rather than debating how practical, pragmatic, righteous a specific idea is. We're throwing out ideas at this point, and let's not maybe get hung up in our underwear over whether it's feasible or not. That's not our job to determine at this stage. Fair?
Thanks, Doug. And I wanted to say for the bullet points at the bottom that you came up with, and in response to what Matt said about we want to give the select board, we don't want to give them a lot of chaff. We want to give them the line that they want to read, and that's that, because otherwise they get bogged down. You know, if the committee is in agreement that what Doug has as bullet points should be included in our recommendation, then we should trust our staff to boil those down to shorter lines that say the same thing, that don't cut out any of the intent. But you know, on SHAB, I'm the secretary, and when we're writing a letter to whoever we want to get them to do something, for instance, it seems like every year we're every winter we're writing letters to all the ferries to get them to slow down so that the sand that they slop along the horse shed doesn't smother the eelgrass. For a letter, the board votes to, we trust Peter to take this letter. We've seen it and we like what he's doing with it. We trust him to perfect it and then send it in as is. So can the committee, take a leap of faith if we all agree with what Doug has put up here? Can we trust our staff to keep the intent but shorten it enough so that the select board can digest it? How does it sound?
Can I try something? With
I
that,
just
with that in
wanna
mind?
see-
Okay.
I just want to see what everyone's thinking. Does that sound good to you guys? Because otherwise we'd have to have another meeting to look at the document and say, yes, it's good.
I think it's too much. Personally, I think it's too much. There might be some good ideas that Vince can pick out of that, but to put that whole thing in there, it's not as bullet point as what Vince has done for us, which I think is a very good job. And I think we should not overload the select board with too much stuff.
So
Okay,
I
Gary.
have an idea.
Okay,
How about I change things around just slightly, right? The purpose that's written up here is to have a funding model for property that benefits from an engineering structure. Super basic. How about I change the first bullet point into purpose and implementation? So we have something halfway between what I've said here and what Doug says in his purpose, and then have like the 3-tier structure, use existing betterments, then town bylaw, and then state level third, and then that can be that, and then this then be we'll go with the first bullet point after that, so that we can have at the top of it a purpose and implementation strategy.
okay, Doug.
Maybe, sorry, it's not just the funding, because the Coastal Resiliency District it may not be funding, it may be some other aspects. It might be, a retreat in a certain area and in a certain way. And so, and I think we're stuck on the funding because, that's sort of where we've started. But I think the purpose is to have a regulatory model, or, or something, which includes funding, but it's regulatory, it's prescriptive, it's asking for public access and other issues, so we have to make sure it's that this word should be inclusive, big picture. I'm trying to think what it is, that it's not just, we're not worried just about funding, we're about doing the right thing in the right areas.
Agreed, Matt, and I hate to interrupt, Peter, if I may. There's a different thing in the Coastal Resilience Plan to undertake a strategic retreat and relocation program. So you're trying to include something that's already in the CRP.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and so a property or neighbor, so should we be saying neighborhoods?
Don't know.
Well, in
All right.
this letter, in this line. Your neighborhoods that benefit from,
Well, you can take property how you like.
I'm just trying to think of what's the big picture way to describe what we want.
Well, that's why I try to keep it as big picture by using one word. Not just lot lines. All right, how about we just try and corral this up for a second?
Well, specific island areas, because the Civic League is broken up into area associations, and there are 25 of them. So, the purpose is to have a funding and regulatory model for specific island areas that benefits from an engineering structure. So we're at least bringing it down to that.
Okay. You want to give me a wording?
Model for specific island areas. And we all know the names of those. Certainly, we're not going to name them, but
We've learned this through the development of the CRP. Everybody knows where everything is, but until you map it, we're lacking it. Everyone told me we're flooded, and then once we actually did all the risk assessment, then we found out. So this feels a bit too specific to me. Sorry, I know people are putting their hands up. You want to go to Jen, Peter?
Yes, I do. Jen?
Thanks, Peter. I think it's important to have this purpose statement up at the top. You know, it's funding, it's regulatory, it's planning. You know, I don't think we have to be super specific on all the needs, but really the purpose of having conservation districts is to give us a tool to prioritize and implement what's in the CRP. You know, those guidelines that are in the CRP in some way that's organized in neighborhoods. So I'm not going to wordsmith it for you because I agree that's almost impossible in a setting like this. The reason I really did raise my hand though is engineering structure, because it's not engineering structure. It's a coastal resilience intervention.
Thank
or
you.
something like that. Yeah.
Good Lord. Ah. All right, so how about I run through this super quick? One of the things that I want to try and knock out quickly, I didn't delete anything from the last meeting, and there's responses to both of Jen and Peter's previous comments. So I think it's safe to delete these two now. Any thumbs down on that? These are now addressed in both this comment here from Jen and this comment here from Gary. So I think we can just go ahead and delete these. Any objection?
Okay, Vince, go ahead, do it.
Gone. Okay, so whole island. So do you remember this is how we talked about track 1 and track 2 before? Whole island or specific areas.
So why don't you, for whole island, Vince, why don't you say whole island could be the coastal resilience district or could be a coastal resilience district? Because we're recommending.
These must be going in my keyboard. Whole island could be a coastal resilience districts.
And that works with the one below that says create as needed. So
This one here.
no, it works with the one below that says create as, yeah.
As needed, yeah.
Perfect. All right,
Yeah,
then that
you don't have
works.
to do anything to it. I'm just saying that the whole island one works with the one below it, the way it
All
is
right.
now.
Yeah, and then that works in tandem with the next one, then create coastal resilience district. Yes, I see. Okay, so I think these three here are pretty okay. Any issues?
If I don't hear from you guys, then we're just gonna move down the list.
Yeah. Next then is localized projects get charged to people who receive benefit from the project and charged accordingly. Okay, anyone have a problem? That's like half the point of this. Okay, look at the possibility of both primary beneficiaries and secondary beneficiaries. It's kind of a no-brainer. Okay, moving on. As sea levels rise, more land will be impacted. This will necessitate changing the project and betterment areas over time. Allow for redefining betterments occasionally. Allow for redefining betterments and areas covered occasionally.
I don't know, as needed. You know, as needed.
That better?
I think so.
I'll read the last sentence so everyone can hear it. Allow for redefining the betterments and areas within the districts as needed. That's both money and area. Seeing some thumbs up. Okay. Need to create an airtight system for betterment collection, like tax collection. I think from the last time, everybody was pretty cool, pretty okay with that one. Okay. Operation and maintenance costs must also be included. I think we'll just delete the word also. Must be
Okay.
included. Okay with that?
Yes,
Okay. Primary plan and backup plan to allow for resilience planning. Betterment analysis based on both plans. Secondary plans can be anything from alternative systems, comma, should the first system fail, to removal and retreat planning. This is my idea, and if people don't like it, fine, but I think it's just prudent to have backup planning. That's the whole point of resilience.
It makes you sound really smart, Vince, so we should keep it.
I don't know about smart Peter. That's it, Matt. Can't even get people's names right. I'm gonna end up like Jericho chewing and walking gum in a second.
Hmm.
All right. Next is yearly evaluation for impacts, feasibility to continue, and project function. Town entities undertake the review, have a decommissioning plan. All right, so there was, if I can take the middle part of this is something that came up during the discussion, and I think this might need to be a bit more specific based on what people are saying. Have town entities to undertake the review, and I would edit this a little bit to have town entities undertake the review, such as, for example, Conservation Commission. So you're giving a statutory board as an example.
I'm good with that. What do you guys think? If I don't see a response or I see a thumbs up, then I guess then that's you guys saying yes.
Have a decommissioning plan. Okay, this whole thing I'm going to start again from the start. Yearly evaluation of impacts, feasibility to continue, and project function. Town entities undertake the review, for example, Conservation Commission. Have a decommissioning plan. Seeing some thumbs up and nods and such. Okay. Allow for cooperation with other programs such as One Big Beach Easement and others. I think that's kind of a given.
Yes.
Seeing thumbs up. Allow for additional benefits such as hold harmless agreements, ensuring public access, donations of land to the town. This, I think, came from Matt Fee. I really liked this one. Any thoughts?
It's okay.
Not seeing anything. Okay. This one I lifted straight from Sarah Boyce, if I remember rightly. Educate property owners and purchasers with what the risks are and put them on notice that they may be subject to group projects and potential betterment costs over time. Include real estate community.
Between purchasers and what, put the word on. Educate property owners and purchasers on what?
Thank you. Okay. Good with this? All right. Okay. And then this is what Jen came up with. Have legal understanding and agreements in place on the ownership of the interventions put in place. If on private property, have a legal agreement between the between town and private property owner, such as a MOU. Seek to include maintenance access, public access to intervention, and public access, I guess. This is public access has come up twice. I don't see a problem with that. Kind of curious if public access should be its own point. That's the only reason I'm saying it. I'm seeing some nods.
Yeah.
How about this? Up here, right here, public access should be included for all interventions. I know I'm adding more points now, but it's just because I'm after reading public access out twice. It just seems prudent to have it as its own point. Does that make sense? I don't mind having it mentioned in other things too.
Yes.
Yes.
I would say considered, because some interventions might not be safe to have public access.
Fair point.
Considered and or prioritized, but yeah.
Okay, so how about this at the start? Consider having public access included for all interventions. Where um, I want to use the word safety. Where possible and safe. Make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. I know we kind of went back up, but I wanted to include operation and maintenance and public access together. There are two big points in my mind. If the committee doesn't disagree, that's why I have them
Good.
together. Okay. So and then by default, I think everyone then just basically agrees with Jen's point.
Yeah, I think Jim's point really is saying if it's on private property, I think what I'm thinking of, I think about this, if it's on private property and they don't do it, we're gonna have it voted and we're gonna charge you and do it anyway. You know, sort of, it's how I look. We don't want to be it held over our heads that, and we don't want it changing, and you want some sort of understanding that the right thing is going to happen wherever this is. So if it's cheaper and the private people want to do it because it's cheaper, that's great, but we should still vote it at town meeting and have the betterments or the coastal resiliency powers to do the right thing if people stop doing it. You see what I'm saying?
Agreed.
So she brought up a really good point, which is that the town has to have the, sort of the final ability to do the right thing if individuals stop, and I don't know how to say that, but.
I think this is good as is. Doug's got his hand up, Peter, through you, if you're okay with that.
Okay, Doug, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, this may not be the forum to have this conversation because I think it's pretty philosophical, but I personally believe that the best way to ensure that a project is done right and maintained correctly is to have one overriding authority that has not only the authority, but the responsibility, the accountability for getting it done. And I have a personal bias that we should be looking for any way we can to ensure there's clarity on any CRP project, that at the end of the day, the town is the accountable authority. And it may be funded through any number of other means, but at the end of the day, we know who to call, we know who to talk to, we know who's on, who's managing this actively. So, that may be a bridge too far for this conversation, but I agree with Matt. I think we just need to be really clear that there is, at the end of the day, a town authority that has the ability to make the right call, even no matter where it is on the island. Thank you.
If you don't mind, Peter, are people generally good with this bullet point for now? Okay. Not hearing any major objections, I'll go to the next one. I've had an idea for the next one. Consider whether CRD sub-districts should require majority vote of approval of betterment initiatives by property owners before undertaking remediating actions and accompanying assessments. If I could offer one potential edit to this, consider whether CRD sub-districts should require majority. Yes, no problem. I'll consider. What I'm trying to get to is that the potential people that may benefit from an intervention are the ones that get to vote, and you have to map it first. I'd like to try and include that there in some way. Does that make sense? So that it's
Say affected property owners.
Well, remember before we said primary and secondary beneficiaries.
Mhm.
I don't want to contradict this point,
Okay.
because is it just primary voters that get to vote on it, or secondary vote beneficiaries that get to vote on it? Or did they just get a half vote? Is that even a thing? I don't think that's legal in America. So,
Said beneficiaries.
Isn't the bigger question how property owners or residents in the sub-districts will have input in a broader sense than just voting on the betterment? We haven't really addressed the issue of input from these communities.
I think that's the point of this.
I'm sure we're gonna get input from these areas facilitated by Mr. Morrison and his area presidents. This, you know, whatever happens with our districts, sub-districts, we'll be hearing from those people.
I've done a little bit of modifying. I've added 2 words. I'm going to read the sentence to see if this fixes it in people's minds. Consider whether mapped CRD sub-district beneficiaries should require majority approval of betterment initiatives by property owners before undertaking remediation actions and accompanying assessments. So I'm literally saying it has to be mapped. And to understand the mapping, you have to understand this. Well, forgive me for the use of the word structure, but right, understand how the structure will do school benefit in primary and secondary, and then you can undertake your vote. So you need to know what you're planning on doing first.
And the other point that we need to think about is, and I think Tim is right about this, is what are the meetings going to be? We should be doing comprehensive planning or comprehensive, open meetings with these neighborhoods. When we did that for sidewalks downtown, it went really well. When we did that a number of years ago, and people were offering up, sidewalks onto their own property to improve it for everybody. They did it around Easy Street. The Yacht Club did it. So I think there is a sort of a public process. We should be saying we're going to do a comprehensive public process to set up and design these neighborhoods.
That's a good idea. Yep.
Yeah.
I've
So-
already heard from my neighbors in Wisconsin about this. People are going to want a process.
So can I make a secondary point? So below this, to have, so this is just the vote from the area, from the people who are directly affected within the sub-district or whatever it might be. And then have a secondary process to have broader community engagement for everyone. Would that be okay to have a point on broader community engagement? Matt, does that make sense? Does that get to what you're trying to say?
Well, it does, but also if it has to go to a vote at town meeting, the lead up is gonna do that regardless. And very rarely will town meeting vote against something that a neighborhood wants.
Yeah.
Or doesn't want, most of the time. But I'm saying, so I think, but the goal is the first step is, you're right, get the people in the neighborhood to meet and talk about what they want and how they will pay for it, et cetera. Help design it so there's buy-in, and then town meeting, in the lead up to town meeting, maybe there's, maybe crack or whatever, whatever entity is going to be doing this has those meetings with the public,
Are you talking about for coastal resilience in districts in general, or specific districts as they get figured out?
I'm thinking specific as they get figured out.
Perfect.
Once
I
you've
see
got one figured out, you're gonna
okay.
have to make the sales pitch.
I got it. No, just trying to make sure.
And Vince, maybe you can just add by a comprehensive public outreach.
Hold on. Everybody through the chair. I know we're doing a workshop type of thing here. And Rachel had her hand up. Did you want to say something, Rachel?
I just want to say that I just had something come up and I have to leave, but if you're on the verge of losing a quorum at any point, just text me. And
No, we have a quorum because Abby showed up.
well, right, but if somebody else has to leave, because I noticed there were some people who might have to leave. So if that changes, just please text me. Have Vince text me. I'm sorry about that.
Okay,
Thanks.
thanks, Rachel.
Yeah.
Okay. Whoever was talking before I interrupted, go ahead. Vince,
Okay, I don't know who it was. I was just about to add a bullet point to get to Matt's point, something to the effect of have broader public outreach and engagement, or island-wide outreach and engagement.
island wide is what you meant, right?
Thank you. Yes. I'm saying the same thing 3 different ways. Have comprehensive, have broader, and just get rid of broader. Have comprehensive and island-wide outreach and engagement on each civil. Does that make sense? So this is the specific for the people in the better resilience district area, and then this is the island-wide engagement.
Gary, you had your hand up. Did you want to say something?
No, Vince corrected that by just adding that new bullet. I was just talking about a, very comprehensive public outreach. But he's done that.
Okay. So
Okay.
through you, Peter, if possible, what I'd like to do is present this to the select board as one page. Or hopefully one page or 1 and a bit pages, keep it brief, that's the point. So I'm going to redefine the purpose between what Doug and I said, clean up this, remove all of the comments, and what we're going to present to the select board will only be on the first page in a bit. Everything else was the supporting material that the committee generated for how we got to those bullet points. So this will all disappear from here on down. Is everyone broadly in agreement with that strategy?
Well, what about the bullet points that Doug proposed? You're going to add those in. You're going to shorten those so that the selectmen don't get bogged down.
So the ones from Doug Rose, the purpose is the one that we mainly heard. Doug has several that are kind of overlapping with what we just had on screen at the top of the page.
Right.
So some of those will just get removed out because they're very similar. The monitoring is already covered. The limits is not. Okay, Doug writes, CRDs shall not in any way circumvent the authority of Nantucket's regulatory bodies, most notably Conservation Commission, Planning Board, or HDC. That's quite nice, actually. Do people like that one? Makes sense to me. Plus, it will kind of be a legal requirement anyway, once we get to that stage, because we can't.
Oh, you're gonna just, if we all want this, Vince, you need to put that back up, put it up above.
Broad consensus? Yes.
Fine.
Yes.
Yeah, it'll be kind of a legal requirement anyway, so it makes sense just to put it in. All right. Sorry, pop it down here. I'm just going to delete this bullet point now because we're getting to dealing with this. And then Control V, there we go. I just kind of like that. Go back down to Doug's thing here now for a second. All right, unintended use is the next thing I want to look at. CRDs shall not be misused to enable private property owners to jump the line on town of Nantucket's most critical resilience measures. There's a part of me that likes this, but I used an example for Sheep Pond Road and I was talking about this before. Yeah, that jumped the line because it had to. I don't want to, like, we're going to have to redefine the list constantly if we accept this one. because things are always changing. We have a dynamic coastline. We have things that come up that we might not necessarily foresee coming. Areas flood in unusual ways and unusual storms that might necessitate changing how we approach things. I see exactly where Doug is going with this, but I think it would be too limiting personally. That's what I would say about this.
Okay, well, how do we feel about what Vince just said? Are we gonna get rid of it?
I would get rid of it.
Doug, you have your hand up?
Yeah, I'm fine if we want to delete it. I think for me, it served a purpose, which was to just reinforce the idea that we should be, to the degree we can, we should be laser focused on infrastructure that is survival critical. And admittedly, there are going to be some things that pop up that were unexpected, but I guess I fear that there could be a misuse of a CRD strategy. But I'm over it. I'm over it. It's 11:36. Take it off.
Okay, so I want to talk about Doug's funding part here. This is something I like too, but is a bit too prescriptive for this early part of the conversation. This might even have to be worked out in the neighborhood by neighborhood level. So I see where he's going with it, but I think it's just too prescriptive this early in the conversation. Once we get to writing the actual legal framework for how this is going to work, and then get to each individual community and betterment area, this is when you work out this kind of stuff. I see what Doug's up to, and this makes sense. It's worth bearing in mind for later, absolutely, but perhaps not now.
So you're saying scrap all of the funding?
Well, yeah, I'm saying not to take it up to the top.
Okay.
Yeah, so what I've been doing is copying and pasting and moving up. And then we've already covered the purpose part to some extent. And I'm going to redefine the purpose a little bit to include some of what Doug's talking about, as we already said. Make sense? Okay, so this is mainly for me, just to do this later. I'm just going to pop this down here so I can blend them together later, okay? And then that'll define the purpose, and then pretty much everything under the suggested bullet points recommendation from CRAC is then set.
Okay.
And make sense?
I'll move, we send that to the select board.
Okay, so the only thing for me to write will be to redefine the purpose a little piece, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
So Gary moved that hold on, Vince. Gary moved that we send it to the select board. I would just add that we are, subject to Vince refining it and finalizing it, and then we'll need a second.
Second.
Tim Brain seconded. Is there any discussion? Okay.
My only comment, I think, yes, I agree, we should send it. Do we have that, the one point that Doug had at the bottom of his, we just had, is it baked into what we have? Like, he's basically saying the town has to own this. There has to be someone in the town that's, oversees this and is responsible for this. Is that written clearly in here? Because I think that's a key point, like who's gonna be the boss, who's gonna be the responsible person, whether it's a person or a committee or somewhere it has to be in there, so it isn't, because if everyone's the boss, nobody is. If everyone's in charge, nobody is. And I think that should be in there to the select board in case it's going to require, some other, more employees or funding or something else for the staff to handle all this. We want to make sure that's in our recommendation. So it becomes part of, over the next few years, it becomes part of it. Does that make sense, Vince?
Yes, it does. I've highlighted a bullet point here on screen, Matt. I don't know if you can see it. I'm going to read it for everyone. And it says, yearly evaluation for impacts, feasibility to continue, and project function. 10 entities undertake the review. For example, Conservation Commission, have a decommissioning plan. That's the full point. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, then
Matt?
I'm fine. I just want to make sure that it's understood. And if there is going to potentially need to be more funding or more people in your department, et cetera, we should be making that recommendation as well.
Doug,
Yeah, I agree. And if we're looking for sort of a punchy headline, I mean, the way I've been thinking about it is we need to have the town own the project, not in a legal sense, but own it in terms of their responsibility, that there's a clear understanding that the town is in charge. So that's one. And then I would say to the same degree on monitoring, it's own the data. What I meant by that was data is power. And if there's a local group that wants to ensure that their project continues to be, in place, the town needs to be able to have an independent review of that data and understand it independent of how it might be spun. But I'm okay. I wouldn't insist on that at this point. I'll shut up.
The weeds.
If I might, Peter, doesn't the MOU kind of cover how that's going to work? And having this first sentence here from Jen, have legal understandings and agreements in place on the ownership and interventions put in place. And then it goes on to describe MOUs. So that kind of answers who owns it. And I imagine because we won't know the funding until we see the intervention itself and what property it's going to be on, it might end up being a joint ownership, literally and figuratively, between the town and whatever the homeowner group is. But that's the kind of thing you work out based on each intervention. But so what you're trying to say is have.
I can live with that.
Okay. Back to you, Peter. So.
okay, so are we all good?
Have you had your second? Has someone
Okay,
seconded?
Tim Brain seconded. So then all those in favor, roll call vote. Gary Beller,
Aye.
Tim Brain,
Aye.
can't see people's names, so I can't, let's see. Abby DiMolina,
Aye. Matt Fee, aye.
Matt Fi, Jen Carberg,
Aye.
Doug Rose,
Aye.
chair votes aye. That's it, we got it. Make us look good, Vince.
And Leah too.
And Leah, sorry, Leah.
Yeah, I imagine it would probably be both Leah and I taking this to the select board on the 13th, I think.
13th.
Is the new date that we got for it. So I have to submit this to the select board. I'll probably get it done today or tomorrow, but by Friday.
Okay, well, that's it.
Thanks, Vince.
No, thank you guys. Thank you very,
Right.
very much.
Thank you. Bye.
Wait, don't say goodbye yet. Okay,
Move-
take a motion to adjourn. I'll take a
Move to
motion to
adjourn.
adjourn.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
Okay, roll call vote. Gary Beller,
Aye.
Tim Brain.
Aye.
I'm trying to do this alphabetically. Matt Fee,
Aye.
Jen Carberg.
Aye.
I skipped Abby. I'm sorry. Abby DiMolina,
Aye.
Doug Rose,
Aye.
chair votes aye. See you guys in a couple weeks. Thank you for your time.
Bye-bye.
Aye, thank you.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.